So we're just going to give a couple of minutes as everybody joins. While everybody's joining, do feel free to open the chat button. We've got Jen and Charles on from PMO Learning, so they'll be helping me keep an eye on the chat. But we do like to kind of know who you are, where you're from, what you're interested in. So if you also, if you've got any questions as we go through the presentation, then feel free to ask the questions in chat. So as I say, I've got one eye on chat, one eye on my presentation, one eye on a few notes, so a few eyes on the people who are joining us. So I may get a bit distracted, I might miss them, but Charles and Jen will certainly kind of pick me up on that. Now you'll see that we've done this as a meeting. One of the reasons why we do this as a meeting is that we can interact, so you get the chance to speak to the other delegates. You can, if you want to, put your camera on. You can even dare you unmute yourself and actually kind of join in some of the conversation. So we can cope with any or all of that. So level of interaction is down to you, and really it's down to make sure that you get what you need out of this webinar. So today's webinar is a taster session for one of our PMO Essentials courses, and this is the final one to have been launched, which is the Essentials for PMO Directors. So we're going to go through the session. It shouldn't take probably about kind of 30, somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes to go through the whole session. So plenty of time for questions as we go, and we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So my name's Eileen Roden. I'm one of the directors of the PMO Learning, and get involved in doing some delivery, not all of the delivery, but do a little bit of the delivery as well. And in terms of my experience, I have been around PMOs all of my working life, though I did do some work in projects. So I was on the other side when I first started, but then moved into the PMO and stayed there for all of the times I was in, as I always say, a proper job. And then for the last 16 years, now coming up to nearly 17 years, I've been on the other side of the table doing training and consultancy, helping project people, but predominantly PMO people to improve project and program management in their organization. I think just probably worth referencing in this particular talk is I was also the lead author for the PMO competency framework, which is one of the kind of the key reference documents for this course. Now, I mentioned about my experience in PMOs because I think that's certainly one of the things that we pride ourselves here at PMO Learning, is that all of our trainers, regardless of what course you attend, either has had a role in a PMO, and quite interestingly, a number of our trainers actually currently have a role in a PMO, so they get special exemption to teach a number of our courses, but they will actually kind of talk about their day-to-day role in their PMO, so ranging from project program and portfolio officers as well, of course, Centre of Excellences. So if you come on a course with us, you will definitely kind of meet somebody who's had relevant experience, still getting relevant experience, and hopefully be able to kind of resonate with some of the challenges that you have in your organization. Our session today is really just to give you an understanding of the content of the House of PMO Essentials, so what's going to be covered on the course. We will go into one particular section in a little bit more detail. I'll not be teaching it as it's taught on the course, because obviously that takes 2 days to deliver all of the information that we give over the 2 days, but we'll certainly touch on the various elements, and we'll pick off a couple of elements in, as I say, in a little bit more detail. And I think the other thing that we just want to cover off, because even though we've kind of locked down, which kind of partly seems a lifetime ago, partly we're still kind of in that kind of transition back to some kind of normality stage, there's still a number of people who haven't done virtual training, or may be under the perception that virtual training is very similar to e-learning. And I just want to kind of give you just a couple of minutes in terms of kind of what we do here at PMO Learning when we talk about a virtual classroom. So let's get on to that, and we'll kind of get that covered. And for those of you who've done one of our sessions before, you'll know that we cover these slides as just a couple in terms of what this virtual classroom means. So there are certain events that you will log on to as a webinar. Webinars tend to be very kind of one way. So there's a speaker, you'll see them on a camera, possibly you'll see some slides a bit like today, and they will kind of talk at you. Then you may get the opportunity to interact with a few polls, but essentially it's kind of a one-way broadcast from that individual. And we would see that very much akin to a lecture. So if you went to a lecture at university or kind of a conference, you tend to sit in the audience. As I say, the speaker might have a bit of interaction, like get people to put their hands up, kind of shout some answers out, but essentially it's kind of a one-way delivery. When we talk about the virtual classroom, that's not what we're talking about. So they are set up as a webinar, but they're set up actually as a meeting, like today's session is. The difference is what we're trying to do here is replicate exactly what it is like to be in a physical classroom. So if you can remember the days not too long ago when you were in a physical classroom, the chances are that the trainer would stand at the front of the room. There would be lots of conversations in groups and individuals around the room. There would be lots of exercises where you wouldn't just be doing an interaction with the trainer, but you would actually kind of go off into the corner, work on a whiteboard, come back and kind of present that. And that's really kind of really enhances the learning, because you're really kind of trying the theory out, kind of trying to get a better understanding how you would apply it in either a scenario or actually talk about what it's like in your organization. And that's certainly what we're doing within the virtual classroom here at PMO Learning. So you will be kind of set off into groups. We expect a level of, kind of a much higher level of engagement and interaction by the delegates, exactly as if you would be in the classroom, which is always, it still surprises me. Some people kind of come onto the course and say, well, actually, I'm just kind of listening to you in the background because I'm going to be doing some emails and what have you. It's not those kind of sessions. In order to really kind of get what the learning is, you really need to engage as if you were sitting on the next desk in the classroom. So we do have a kind of a couple of house rules that we do. We walk through with the delegates before we start. And again, they're all kind of recognizing that people have their own particular preferences, but really in terms of getting the best out of the course, we do ask that people remain visible through the day. So we ask people to put their cameras on. We know we've got kind of people here, you've chosen not to put the camera on. If you come on a training day, we really do ask you to kind of put your camera on so you can see your future delegates. We do limit the number of delegates to 12 to make sure that everybody gets the kind of due care and attention from the trainer, because part of the trainer's role is to make sure that each one of the delegates is getting a real understanding of what's involved, and certainly on the certification courses to make sure that they're suitably prepared for the exam. We do recognise that people are sitting on their laptops, and people are always kind of quite surprised is that, kind of how adept the trainers are kind of seeing where people can sometimes get a little bit distracted. Often they're kind of they just get a little bit distracted and go off to another screen like that, or you kind of see their eyes kind of starting to do this because they're kind of reading some emails. So we do try and say, well, actually during the kind of the main training sessions, if you can shut down your email, your WhatsApp notifications, etc., it really helps you focus on the course, which does allow you to be much more involved. So not only in the exercises, but also in discussions as we go through the course, because it is your opportunity to ask all of the questions you want to ask. And what we always say, particularly at a kind of a PMO Directors course at this level, the learning is not just from the trainer, the learning is also from the discussions with the other delegates on the course, because the other delegates on the course are going to be people who have a similar level, have similar challenges, and kind of very much in a similar role. We are very conscious that we do have some technical and occasionally we do have some technical challenges. We don't take the opportunities we could to kind of mute everybody. We let people mute and unmute is right by them. We do provide some technical support on the day if people kind of struggle to get in. So we do kind of provide some support from that. But again, it's about learning to kind of work through that kind of technology to make sure that we get the best out of it. But also we ask people to be considerate and recognise that the other delegates are on the course. The other delegates are kind of looking to get the most out of the course and making sure that kind of just standard etiquette that people kind of turn up on time after the breaks, etc., is much appreciated. In terms of technology, primarily we use Zoom as the primary kind of delivery mechanism. Again, we use video audio and we use a PowerPoint presentation. We always have a chat open. We use breakout rooms and polls. So we do kind of use the whole kind of functionality of Zoom. We found it's the most intuitive. But to supplement that, and again, we use it through kind of the Zoom functionality, we have 3 other technologies that we use: Mentimeter, Miro, and Trello. Now, it's important that you just recognize that all of the 3 technologies we use other than Zoom are also free to the delegates. So PMO Learning have some license fees that we pay, but they're free to the delegates, so there's no additional cost for you to sign up. In your joining instructions, which you'll get a week before the course, it will give you some instructions in terms of how to kind of log on and make sure that you can have access to them and there's no problems, or we can kind of help you through that prior to the course. And again, on the morning of the course, we'll have one of our people there to support you to make sure we've got no technical problems logging on. So that's the technology we use. As I say, we try to make it as much like a physical classroom as possible. The only thing that happens differently is you tend to get your tea breaks without being hassled by the trainer joining you kind of with when you're having your cup of coffee. You tend to get a bit of peace and quiet at break time, but other than that, very much like a classroom environment. So on to the certification. Now, as I said, this is the 4th certification that's come out from the House of PMO. Now, the House of PMO, for those of you who've not seen the House of PMO, don't know much about it, this is a new professional body for people working in PMOs. I think we're coming up, I can never remember, I think we're coming up to the 2nd birthday of the House of PMO. It was set up by myself and Lindsay Scott because we were very conscious that other project management associations and institutions didn't necessarily provide things specific for people who worked in a PMO. So this is very much kind of completely aimed at people who work in the PMO. All of the events we do, the publications we do, the reports in our library is for those things that would be of specific interest for people who work in the PMO. So we have a number of webinars. There's lots of events that take place, not least the conferences, I say, in number of publications that the House of PMO has produced. Now, over the last 12 to 18 months, we've had 4 credentials that have been released: administrator, analyst, manager, and director. And these are all part of a suite called the House of PMO Essentials. Now, let me just kind of be clear about what the essentials are. These certifications are not about kind of very experienced kind of individuals who've worked in the PMO for several years, know what they're about, have really kind of got their job. It's not a kind of a certification. It's not a stamp on the head to say that you're competent. What we're saying is that these are these courses provide you with the kind of the knowledge and an indication of the skills and competences you need to actually be able to work in that role. So therefore, people who are coming into the role of PMO for this particular course, it's about people who are coming into the role of PMO director or have recently been given the role of PMO director. One of the things that we're very conscious of is that when people work in PMOs, we know that PMOs can do a huge range of different things, and you can work in one PMO, get a job in another PMO, and kind of think, well, actually, I don't recognize this because I'm doing a whole load of things that I didn't do in a previous organization. And so what these essentials certifications are about is for understanding the breadth and depth of the role that will cover off all of the things that potentially will cover whatever organization, whatever industry, whatever country you're in the world. So they're truly global certifications, and they say prepare you or kind of expand your knowledge of the specific role that you're in. Now, we have got 4 levels of certification, and much as people are very kind of aspirational and kind of want to do kind of the kind of the highest certification, we often find what ourselves and the APMG have done is that we've made sure that there are kind of prerequisites to get the right delegates onto the right course. There's nothing worse for the delegate or the trainer or for the other delegates if people kind of end up on the wrong course and they don't have the right knowledge experience to kind of join in the kind of the conversations, or the trainer feels as though they've got to spend lots of time kind of covering off kind of previous things that have covered in previous certifications. So at the PMO director level, we do ask that you've got some there are some prerequisites. As you kind of sign on to the course, we will be contacting to make sure that you have those prerequisites. There is a further check done by APMG about having to load those prerequisites into their website before you will be allowed to get your examination results. So in terms of the prerequisites, we do ask you for whether you've got the essentials for PMO manager certification. So if you're doing a kind of a natural progression, you've done the essentials for PMO manager and you kind of done that, and we're now working on towards becoming a PMO director. That's one route of coming in. Secondly is to have some kind of practitioner certification, and really that's kind of quite a broad list. It just recognizes that you know a bit about projects, programs, portfolio, kind of change management. Again, we're not precious about whether that's from an agile or a kind of a waterfall, but it's really about just demonstrating your level of kind of knowledge and around projects and program management. We also recognize that people coming into a PMO director role may not necessarily have had delivery experience. They're not always people who've worked in a PMO. They're not always people who've been a project or program manager. So where we've got this kind of final entry route in terms of a prerequisite for the PMO directors and House of PMO certifications, it's about people who've potentially been a project or program sponsor or have been involved in a transformational program with their organization or a previous organization. What we're finding around the PMO director role is that it's often, and we'll come on and demonstrate why, but this PMO director role is often individuals who have spent several years running functions in the organization, but have come over to the PMO director role because they recognize what a PMO can do for their organization, but they also understand the organization, what changes need to take place. They understand the industry and what the challenges are, and want to work with the senior team, and they have credibility in the senior team to understand the direction, the strategy of the business, and how best the projects and programs can be organized and supported by an effective organizational PMO. So that, as I say, that final route typically is for people who have not necessarily had a delivery role previously, but have had some experience of being involved in a transformational program or being a kind of a project or program sponsor in their organization. So the three core texts that we use on the course, the first one is the PMO competency framework. This has now been out for a couple of years. So this was developed again by the House of PMO. It was a 5 years hard work with a team from across the globe of volunteers who really kind of helped shape an understanding of what competences individuals need in order to work at the various roles within the PMO. And again, we pull on the role profile from the competency framework, but also the competencies that are required for each role. The second text we do is the PMO service catalogue, which again, as it says on the tin, it's an insight into what PMOs do. Now, it essentially is a service catalogue detailing, I think, over 400 services that a PMO can provide. And again, we don't expect PMOs to provide each of those 400 services. It's a selection of those. So those texts are provided as part of the course materials, so you will get a hard copy of both of those documents. However, as you'll recognize as we kind of come to go in a little bit more detail, we don't talk about every last thing. Not all of that is examinable. So we have a course book where we have the course materials, and that highlights all of the things that are actually that can be examined when you do the exam. But what we found over last year when we didn't provide the core texts, people said, no, we really want, even though it's not all examinable, we want them as reference books. And so you'll get both of those reference books as part of your part of the price of the course. Now, there is a core text, and I've got the book there. However, there isn't necessarily a need for a physical book for this one, because at www.praxisframework.org, there is a free-to-use delivery framework that we provide, that anybody has access to, but we use some of those details on the course. And the reason why excuse me, the reason why we do that is because as we talk through some of the competencies, it's obviously linked to project, program and portfolio management. And so we wanted some kind of some text to some theoretical kind of project program management text to refer to. So we've linked up with Praxis because that's free to use. And I think it's also worth noting that if you work in a PMO and you're looking for a delivery framework or some kind of templates or a bit more information about certain elements, then the Praxis framework is a really great resource to use. So as I say, we don't provide the book, but we do kind of explore the website that you can have access to. In fact, now you could go in, not obviously until the end of the presentation, but you can go and have a look this afternoon and see what's on praxisframework.org. Now, in terms of the PMO competencies, and this is directly for the competency framework, we identified 24 competences across 4 domains. So 4 domains are PMO administration, PMO management, P3M delivery support, and P3M enabling. Now, at the PMO Directors course, we spend really an awful lot of time looking at those P3M enabling competencies, which is really about understanding how do we enable an organisation to successfully deliver their projects and programmes. And it's not just about having the delivery framework in place, it's about making sure that all of those other critical success factors are in place for delivery. So again, we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail, but that's the overall kind of competency levels. We'll talk a little bit about delivery support, but primarily in P3M enabling. Now, from the competency framework, you can use it to build up the competencies for any role within your PMO. When we were doing the development, we identified kind of 4 key roles that are in PMOs, potentially kind of 4 different levels: PMO administrator, PMO analyst, PMO manager, and PMO director, as previously mentioned. And for each of those role profiles, we provide the purpose, the key responsibilities, key knowledge, key skills, and really, really importantly, the key behaviours. So what behaviours should we be demonstrating for each of those roles? We also link to other competence frameworks. So we recognise that you may need project, programme, portfolio competence, change management competence, business analysis competence, but also leadership and management. So the PMO competence framework doesn't cover those off. The PMO competence framework is purely about understanding the PMO competencies that are required in order to do the role, and that's what's covered off in the course. So I thought it would just be useful just to have a quick look at the role of the PMO director. Oh, there we go. There we've got the purpose of the 4 roles. So PMO administrator, very much around supporting the P manager, whatever that P stands for, the P manager and their team, primarily focused on the administrative and secretariat aspects. So we've had lots of kind of conversations as to whether PMOs are an admin function or not an admin function. Certainly when we have done our research, what we identified is that actually PMOs do administration. The important thing to recognise is they don't just do administration. So it's a part of their potentially part of their role. For a lot of organizations, it's not part of their role at all, but certainly kind of PMO administrators are out there in force in the industry. So that's the first role. Moving on to the PMO analyst, and the PMO analyst is really probably the broadest role, and typically kind of broken down into two areas. Firstly, into kind of supporting the P manager in the delivery. Now, that supporting the P manager can go from you know, kind of maintaining the risk register on behalf of the manager. It can be phoning round to get the status reports and writing the status report on behalf of the project program portfolio manager. Or it could be when we get to kind of a senior analysts, they're the people who actually kind of coach, educate the project and program manager on kind of how and why certain things need to be done in the project. And I did some coaching a while ago with somebody who was moving into a PMO analyst role from a PMO administrator. And they said to me, I'm really looking forward to working with a PMO manager who will help me really understand a little bit more about kind of my role, but obviously around projects, programs and portfolio. And sadly, she was joined up with a project manager who said, I'm really looking forward to having a really good PMO analyst who can show me around all of the templates and how we do things in this organization. So some interesting resourcing, I have to say, but kind of that, you know, kind of it can, as a sales scale from really kind of just doing things for the project manager to really kind of guiding and supporting the project manager in some of the kind of the broader aspects of their role. So that's part of the analyst role. The second part of the analyst role is about supporting the PMO manager in the delivery of PMO initiatives. And typically what we mean by this is rolling out new services from the PMO. So we might be introducing some services around risk management. We may be introducing some new services around benefits management. We may be introducing new resourcing processes or a new tool. And those are the types of things where the PMO analyst may actually kind of run those projects on behalf of the PMO manager, or actually just be part of the team, do a bit of analysis or a bit of the training, whatever is required by those individuals. So a very kind of broad role from a PMO analyst perspective. Going up to the PMO manager, now we see the role as the PMO manager is very much around managing a PMO. So, excuse me. So looking at what is required by their particular customers, what services need to be required. And actually we're doing a bit of a thing this week on our blogs from PMO Learning on some key things around PMO managers. Now, what's the difference between a PMO manager and a PMO director? Now, the real kind of key shift from a PMO manager to a PMO director, but we recognize that the PMO director may actually be called the PMO director, maybe called a PMO manager, but in that case, it typically is the PMO manager. So the PMO director is that individual in your organization who looks across and has oversight of all of the PMOs within that organization. So interestingly, if you've only got one PMO, the likelihood is that you're going to have some some aspects of the PMO director role that you'll have to undertake. But typically, a PMO director will be the manager of the organizational portfolio office and will have oversight of a number of other project program, even other kind of hub portfolio officers that sit across the organization. And their role is to make sure that the services that are provided across all of those PMOs are doing what they can to support the organization to deliver their strategy through the various kind of portfolios of change. So again, it's about providing that insight. I think we also kind of recognize that the PMO director may well be involved and have ownership of the project and program teams. So may also be seen to be accountable for project and program delivery. On the course, we very much focus on setting the environment, the infrastructure, the ecosystem for delivery, rather than kind of looking at kind of what their role is in terms of from a delivery perspective. So let's just want to go and just have a look at what's actually involved in that PMO manager's roles. And as you'll see, what we've got is we've taken from the competency framework, we've taken some of the key responsibilities for the PMO director. Now I'm just going to kind of touch on these a little bit because, as I say, they're covered off in detail in the course, but hopefully this might kind of help you start thinking about whether the PMO director's course is where you are or where you're kind of aspiring to be. So first key role, and this is where we use not just our PMO skills, but also some of our kind of portfolio knowledge, is typically the PMO director will be working with the senior team, either within the directorate across the organisation, to make sure we understand what needs to be delivered and making sure we've got the right governance and delivery framework in place in order for them to be able to deliver that, but not in a siloed perspective. Certainly at the PMO director level, we have to have an understanding of kind of how all of our projects and our portfolios sit alongside the business as usual activities of our organization. So that's kind of really key as well. They will look at and develop an organizational wide vision and say, well, what is the PMO here to do in this organization? What's that going to look like? Are we having a single PMO? Are we having 27 different PMOs across the organization? You'll see that next bit is that actually it's their role as the PMO director to make sure those PMOs are established correctly and have the right resourcing and have the right budget in order to be able to support that. And they will provide, typically through a kind of a series of reporting, assurance and governance, to make sure that we've got the right strategic overnight and governance and insight of the initiatives to senior management. Now, an important part, an important point to mention, I think, is that we don't see the PMO director, or in fact anybody in the PMO, is being the kind of the key decision makers on projects and programs. We are a support function to the business. We will provide them with the information. We can provide advice and guidance to project and program managers, but we recognize that kind of key decisions on projects are made by sponsors, key decisions on portfolio are made by the executive team, and so we are essentially the person who can kind of do that, present that information, talk through, and as I say, provide advice and guidance, but making sure that those decisions are made by the senior team of the organization. Part of the role, typically through Centre of Excellence or a number of Centre of Excellences across the organisation, the PMO director is accountable for making sure that we have the right delivery capability in the organisation. Now, that's not just a case of have we got the right number of people with the right number of skills. It's about have we got the right processes and governance in place? Are we doing the right level of assurance? Have we got the right level of support? Have we got people in the right roles? And not just from a delivery perspective, but also in terms of kind of project boards, program boards, portfolio boards, change boards, to make sure that decisions are made effectively across the portfolio, which kind of leads on to the next bit in terms of making sure we've got the right level of assurance, the right level of objectivity to ensure that things are being delivered as we would expect and are going to deliver those outcomes. There is a kind of a line management role within the PMO director to lead the overall PMO function. And again, although we may not necessarily have the whole everybody reporting directly into us, understanding kind of how that's catered for, making sure that whatever money is spent on the PMO is spent wisely and that investment actually delivers some benefits for the organisation. one of the things that we've kind of talked a bit about is in terms of behaviour, and a key role for a PMO director is to make sure that they nurture a culture that motivates and inspires excellence in the delivery of projects and programmes for their organisation. Now, driving culture is not the easiest challenge and quite a kind of difficult thing to do, and it's really about working at the kind of the right level in the organisation, and predominantly kind of doing from a top down, from a kind of cultural perspective, to make sure that the expectations, the risk and reward is set up to kind of really kind of recognise the right way to deliver those projects, and ultimately leads the definition, rollout and continuous improvement of project programme and delivery standards. Now, I do think it's worth mentioning at this point, as I mentioned as we started, the PMO director is not always somebody who's had lots of project and programme management experience. So typically the PMO director will be having some experts who work within the PMO that will help them develop this framework. And again, it's not necessarily delivered as a single thing, a single element. There will be multiple pieces that kind of go to contribute to that. So there may be in the wider PMO staff, there'll be people who are risk management specialists, benefits management specialists, resourcing specialists, tool specialists, etc. But actually about making sure that the things that are being rolled out really kind of add value to the organisation. Now, if you're sitting there looking at those things, well, I do a bit of those and not some of them. As I said, you know, kind of not every organisation has a PMO director that has the job role profile taken from the competency framework. Hopefully, if you're kind of looking to move into that role, or you recognise kind of some of the things that you're kind of going to be stepping up to do in your organisation. Certainly, the role profile has been, it was validated during the development of the competency framework. But I think what's really interesting, as we've seen even since the competency framework came out, we've seen more and more PMO director roles out in the marketplace. So it really kind of matches the kind of the key responsibilities that we've just identified. So conscious of the time, time always flies. I do love the subject. So let's just have a quick look in terms of kind of what the purpose of the course is. Now, it's a 2-day course. We recognise that getting people, senior PMO directors, out of the organisation for more than 2 days is a bit of a challenge. So we deliberately kept it to 2 days. And what we do is we recognise that the value of the course is not just necessarily attending the course, but it's actually kind of meeting other people, almost kind of creating a kind of an alumni of PMO directors. So you have that network to continue outside of your or following the course. But what we want to do on the course is make sure that as all of the delegates have a really understanding about kind of where they sit in terms of PMOs and project and program and portfolio management, understand kind of where they sit in terms of the 4 different roles, but then understand the specific competences that they are going to have to continue to develop as they undertake that role. And we know it's a director's course, but there is a certification that will recognise that you've achieved and understood that role. There's a 60-minute exam in which you've got 50 questions. Now, as you go through the course, there are practice questions all the way through. There's a practice paper that hopefully will get you in a position where you feel comfortable that you can kind of sit and be successful in the exam. Now, the exam is not done during the 2 days. The exam is done online after the event at a time that you can arrange with the examination board. So there's a kind of a select, you kind of go onto the website and kind of pick the date and the time you want to do the course. So that's available 24/7. So if you want to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning, if you're one of these kind of executive early risers, up at 5, working by 6, or if you're like me, you're a kind of a night owl and you want to do it at 10 o'clock at night, and I have done an exam at 10 o'clock at night, you can put that in also. So in terms of what do we cover off on the course, on day one is really a kind of the broad brush of understanding kind of where we sit in the world. We'll cover off some kind of key concepts, recognizing that the certifications have not been out there for a long time. So you'll not have people who've done administrator, analyst and the manager's course as kind of a working up to the director's course. So we do cover off some of those key concepts. So things like the different types of PMO, as the whole concept of a service-based PMO is also kind of covered off in those key concepts. We'll talk a little bit more of the roles and the role of the PMO director, so we'll expand more on what we've just kind of discussed. And then we'll talk about the PMO in context. So, you know, kind of from a PMO director's level, what does the PMO look like? What is it we're expected to do and understand about what PMOs do? And then we talk about P3M delivery support. Now, delivery support, people think, well, surely that's just not more than admin. But actually, you'll find, even as a PMO director, you are still supporting typically the organizations, typically kind of senior sponsors, but you are providing some delivery support services to help project sponsors, project program managers to do their role. So we do cover off a bit of the delivery support. And then as we go into day two, this is where we pick off the enabling competencies. So there's 4 enabling competencies we pick off: capacity management and capability development, assurance and governance. The 4 kind of key areas where as a PMO director, you will be focusing your time. And then there's a little bit on exam preparation before we close. So that's what the 2 days look like. It is jam-packed to get it into 2 days. We are looking, and just to let you into this kind of secret, we are looking later in the year to start running a residential version, so we can make use in the evenings and have some other PMO directors again come and meet and greet. So you just kind of broaden your network in that kind of senior level role. So I thought, just looking at the time, I'm going to kind of rattle through some of these in terms of, this is the PMO in context, which is kind of session 4 of day 1. It's not the complete session. I'm literally going to kind of touch and whistle through a couple of the slides. Obviously on the course, we'll do these in a little bit more detail. I'm going to give you one example of an exercise, but there are multiple exercises that are littered throughout the day to help you understand the theory, but also to start getting an understanding of how you can take that theory and put that in practice in your own day-to-day role back in your organization. So we do talk about vision, mission and strategy. Interestingly, we talk about vision, mission and strategy of the organization, but then we also talk about the vision, mission and strategy for the PMO, and not just a kind of a single PMO, but actually that whole kind of PMO capability, the PMO function within the organization. We talk about how strategy and governance is aligned. One of the kind of the key challenges we have in a PMO is establishing the governance that allows projects and programs to be delivered correctly, but also the governance that allows us to do our role, but also that gives our role teeth, so that, you know, kind of when we produce a report, we do perhaps an assurance review. When we produce a report and say we've got kind of, we've identified a number of elements within that particular project or program, it isn't just, oh, that's interesting, but actually kind of there's a kind of the senior management bought in to actually kind of listen to that, and action is taken based on some of the assurance activities that we undertake. So we talk very much around that kind of strategy and governance and why that's important. And then we work on how the kind of the PMO director works with various stakeholders to deliver what we call a service strategy. So what services is the PMO function going to provide and how it's going to be provided. So we walk through this in a little bit more detail, how the PMO stakeholders, so we'll talk about who those kind of key stakeholders are, how they work with the PMO director to develop and agree a PMO vision. So what is it we want our PMO to do? What would be, you know, kind of a, how does it really going to help? How is it going to make a difference in the organization? And that, as I say, that PMO vision actually has to be aligned to the corporate vision and strategy. And once we've kind of got that vision aligned and understand how it's going to help at an organisation level, the role of the PMO director is really about delivering a PMO service strategy that actually delivers that PMO vision. Now, it would be great, wouldn't it, if we could say, well, actually, regardless of kind of where we are, here's a PMO vision and here's a kind of a PMO service strategy. Oh, look, we've got the service catalogue. Just do everything it says in the book and you'll be fine. However, we recognise that every organisation is very different. And actually, there is a lot of difference between capability and maturity in organisations and within the PMO. So again, we recognise and we will talk through how some of the theory is tailored in order for it to be delivered by that particular organisation. Again, we'll talk about how the PMO director's role splits between the delivery and the PMO services. And as I said on the course, we're primarily talking about kind of over on the right-hand side and delivering those services. And what we need to do in order to deliver those services is to have what we would call an integrated PMO model. So recognizing how many PMOs, where they're going to sit, how that's impacted by your organization. And essentially what we'll come up with is a number of different PMOs which will have their own services catalogue and operations handbook. So in the totality, they deliver the services that would allow the PMOs to deliver the kind of that central PMO vision. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the different types of PMOs that we might sit. Now, a key part of the PMO as a PMO director is not just kind of putting this all in place, but recognizing whether it works, whether it, as we've talked about, whether it actually provides value for money for the organization. And so one of the things that we will need to do is to produce a series of metrics and measures for our particular PMO. But I think the important thing is that we kind of recognize that not only do we want all of these things to be integrated from the various different services across the various kind of PMOs, we actually want them to link into and be aligned to the corporate metrics and measures. So there's no point in saying, you know, the organization's aim is to kind of move into kind of 3 new geographies over the next year, and we've got some major programs that are going to help us deliver that, for us to come and say, oh, we did 27 project reviews last week. Well, that's great. That means that you've been a bit busy, but how does that really contribute to the strategy and the delivery of where we're going with the organization? And so we talk about kind of making sure we've got the right metrics and measures in place with our vision and services strategy, but also to recognize how that might link into other organizational measures as well. And so we do that as an exercise. And even though we've got people coming from lots of different organizations, we do that in different groups. We kind of go off into breakout rooms. There are some really insightful conversations about, you know, kind of learning from the other delegates on the course. But it's about really, as I said, starting to think through and any of the trainers that you have will have had experience of doing this in organizations, can talk through some kind of real life examples of kind of what metrics and measures can be used, some real challenges in terms of kind of how that is recorded and reported, but hopefully kind of what you get out of that is something kind of really something meaningful. But also I think an understanding of not just how it is in your organization, but how it is in other organizations too. So that's a very kind of brief run through, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of the kind of the level that the course is set at. So we're not talking about, you know, kind of an individual risk management service or kind of, you know, what do we do in terms of kind of a tool. It really is that from a PMO kind of strategic level, how do we work with the organization to make sure the PMO is the best it can be for our particular organization. So I've managed to talk for 50 minutes. We've not had any questions in chat. Has anybody got any immediate questions that they want me to answer now? As I say, Charles will just be in touch to give you an opportunity to ask any questions after the course. But feel free to raise any now if you've got them. So, or next, if you're interested in PMO Directors course, we have got one scheduled next month. Now we're into February, we can say that. 22nd to 23rd of March, it's available on the website to book. Or if you want to have a conversation, as I say, around kind of some of the prerequisites, Charles will take you up with that. Other courses that we've got next Monday, not too late. We've still got another 4 or 5 hours of business here in the UK. If you want to join our benefits management course, we've got that next week. Again, very much not just this is benefits management, but from a benefits management perspective, what does that mean from a PMO perspective? How do we support benefits management? How do we drive benefits management in the organisation? 13th and 14th of February, we are running a P3O practitioner course. And then at the end of February, 21st to the 23rd of February, we're running the essentials for PMO managers. So if you've listened to today's session and you've thought, well, actually, I thought I was going to be a PMO director, but listening to that, I might be just at a PMO manager level. Then actually, we've got a course running the 21st to the 23rd of February. Now, if you have got a large number of kind of PMO individuals within your organisation, all of our courses are available to be delivered in-house. If you get in touch with Charlie. Charlie, can you just stick your contact details in chat, please? If you want to get in touch with Charlie, he can kind of take you through what's involved in running a course in-house. One other thing to say is anybody who attends our courses, we do offer embedding support where we can come and run some tailored workshops for your organisation. Again, not necessarily running the course, but understanding how we can do implementation in your organisation. And we also offer one-to-one coaching. So as an individual, you say, well, actually, I did the course, it was really good. I've got some ideas in terms of how I'm going to make it happen in our organisation. But if you want some one-to-one support, we can provide that too. I have to say, just to be clear, both of those are chargeable services that are follow on any course. So that's us done for today. As I said, if you need any help, as our contact details, you can see us on the course, and enquiries at pmolearning.co.uk if you want to ask a direct question. Otherwise, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you on one of our courses soon. Thank you.